I am gifted with sensations. My eyes, ears, mouth, nose, my skin all tether me to the wonders of my world, and my being tingles with the thrill of a newly plucked harp string. Nimbus clouds scud across the heavens as I hear a roll of thunder, smell the nutty sweetness of fresh hay lying in the candid air. My name is Joycelyn Loeffelholz-Rea. Used to be Magnus, my maiden name, and Rea, it's a second marriage. I was born in Jamaica in Port Maria, which is a small town, in 1931. I live in apartment 302, 1505 Baseline Road, Ottawa. I had no members of my grandfathers because they died before I was born. My maternal grandfather, he left when my mother was a baby and went from Jamaica to Cuba to work in the plantations there, which a lot of people were doing in those days. And he never came back. So they don't know what happened to him, whether he died or he just ignored everybody else. So my mother was the first of 7 children that my grandmother had. My paternal grandmother, she was around when I was aware of having relatives. She was around and she looked after us because my parents worked, and she looked after us, cousins and my brother and so on. So we were very close to her. She was a very protective grandmother. We couldn't do anything wrong, and don't complain to her about her grandchildren because she wouldn't take it kindly. Whereas my maternal grandmother, she was very strict. She wasn't at all easy to get on with like my paternal grandmother. I never saw her walk. She lived in the country, in the mountainous part of the country, and the houses were built with high cellars. And every morning they used to take her out and she would sit under that cellar and command everything for the day. All her children and nieces that whatever lived with her, she did all the commanding. But I never saw her walk. I don't know what was wrong with her, but I never saw her walk. She lived in the country in a place called Albion Mountain. And we lived in Port Maria, which was an old port town. last place we lived, which was around the same, we moved around a bit, but around the same area. The last address we have is 6A Cox Street. In my house was my mother, as far as I can remember now, my mother, my stepfather, and me, of course, and my younger brother. My parents were separated, and they both got married again. It's a small town, and so she lived on another street, but you know, it was close enough within walking distance. I had an older brother, my father's child. My other brother died, and I had a younger one who was 8 years younger than I am, and he's still alive and in Jamaica, Dalling, and he had 2 sons. One is still in Jamaica, he's married with children, and the other one lives in Montgomery, Alabama.
And do you still keep in contact with
Oh yes, yeah. My family, we were very close. I have a lot of memories of my father. In fact, I just finished writing an essay about my father.
Oh, yeah.
I shouldn't say finished because a lot of it were not pleasant memories. And after I wrote that, I looked at it and I said, but I did have some good times with my father. So I went back over it and started inserting some of the pleasant memories to point out that it was not all bad. In fact, our problems arose more when I was a teenager to adult, more than when I was young. A story, my father was very lenient with me. He never scolded me when I was young, that is. In those days, kids were always spanked, but my father never touched me. So I guess it was not the norm as far as I could see. So when I was in kindergarten, and our system was based on the British system where you went to a kindergarten for 4 years, from 4 till 8, and then you went to the public school. And my father made homemade ice cream and sold that. That's what he did for a living. And he was across the street from the school one day, so I was under 8 anyway. I'd say probably I was about 5. And I was telling my friends how my father never scolded me. I could get away with anything for my father. And when I saw him across the street, I came with my friend. I walked across the street at recess time to my father. And after saying hi to him, I slapped him in his face. And of course, he was livid. I don't know. I shouldn't say I don't know why I did it. I did it because I wanted to prove to this friend that my father would not get mad at me. Of course, he did. He was livid and told me never ever to do that again. But he didn't slap me or anything like that. So. Yeah, so I'm thinking of it because, as I say, I just wrote this essay about my father. I can't remember them together. my mother was, I think my brother was born when I was 8 years old. So all that time it was just my mother and I. And she sort of went overboard. She worked, she did housekeeping for a living, made a pittance. But I was always dressed in the latest. I think she got pleasure out of promoting me, sort of. If it was Easter, it was new clothes, Easter, Christmas, harvest, whatever it is, I had new clothes for it. So I was always well dressed. Because of that, I ended up being flower girl in many weddings that I didn't even know who was getting married because my mother liked to dress me up. So I would be dressed up in all these frills and laces and at these weddings and didn't even know who was getting married. I have a whole book that talks about my mother. She was me. I don't think I would have made it through life without my mother. She boosted my every effort. She didn't spend any time criticizing me. Whatever I came up with was pleasing to her. When I went to continuation school out of town after I finished public school, and my mother found a way of, because I had to take the bus there, of paying, we had to pay to go to the school, of paying to put me in that school, of paying a weekly bus pass for me to go. When I went to high school in the city, we had a small farm. My mother had a small farm here. And part of my boarding was paid by sending a basket of food every week on the bus to keep me going. I describe my mother as someone who could spin straw into gold. She was just there, and it's amazing what she did with her life. My stepfather in the 40s, my stepfather went to the States as a farm worker. And those days they gave what they call the dependents money to the relatives back home or to the dependent person back home. And my mother saved every bit of it, and we were able to buy a small house. In fact, we ended up buying 2 small houses. And then when he came back, and there was land for sale, one of these plantations was cut up and lots were being sold. And they sold one of these houses to buy a 3.5 acre lot, which they used as their farm, and they were able to make a living with that. So it was just one of those things that when I look back, I wonder, how did she do it?
Wow.
She died in December of 93. My father died before that. She was 87 when she died. My father was 80. They got along fine, I mean, like any other couple. I never got on with my brother. I didn't like him.
Oh, you're honest.
I didn't like him. I found him a nuisance, especially when he used to tell my friends and I, he was just not in my category at all. after I left Jamaica and came to Canada, I returned. It was 7 years before I went back. And my brother then, who lived on the other side of the island, had come to visit because I was there. And we talked way into the night, must have been until about 2 a.m. or somewhere there. And it was amazing. I had never had a conversation with my brother before. And I found him so interesting. He's a very intelligent fellow. He he knows everything. And I was amazed. You know, and I thought, gee, there's this guy. I've never told him that I didn't like him. I don't know whether I mentioned it in the book. I might have. But I was sort of shocked that the person who I had come to know at that stage.
Turned out okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I was about 29. I had been a nurse and was working for a while. It's a different system altogether that we have. And high schools in Jamaica are paid. It's not like here where you just move on. You pay to go to high school. We have a basic education up to the age of 15. And after that, you're out on your own. And so if your parents can afford it or if you get some help, then you can move on. Otherwise, that's it. I think it's changed now. The British system changed also till they got into O levels and A levels, and I think it's the same thing in Jamaica now. When they have a common entrance exam and you can get scholarships and stuff. In my day, we had what we call a parish scholarship, and so each parish, only one student could get a scholarship. Then there was a Jamaica scholarship where one student out of the entire, and in that way you'd be able to go to high school. Otherwise you had to pay. All Jamaican children wear uniforms. In fact, you even say downtown Kingston, and it's more marked now. At the end of the day, you would see so many different uniforms and you could tell what school these children went to. And because of that, behavior was very important because it would go right back to the school, that one of the students, because you were distinctive in uniform. The boys all wore khaki, but they had distinctive ties.
Okay.
So
That sounds awfully British too.
it is. Well, Jamaica was part of the British West Indies. Well, I always wanted to be a nurse. That was one of my goals from I was a little girl. I wanted to be a nurse. I don't know whether I wanted to do nursing as such, but I like the idea of walking around dressed in white with a white cap and the image. I like that. But I actually did enjoy nursing until nursing started to change and become more technical than the hands-on nursing that I enjoyed.
Okay. And did that happen in Jamaica? Or?
No,
Okay.
no, after I
It was
came.
hands-on in Jamaica.
Yes, yeah.
So where did you go to nursing school?
In Jamaica, at the University of the West Indies was just started then, and they had a They started first. Nurses were trained in the hospital directly. When the university was built, they started a preliminary training school where you went for 3 months, and at the end of that you took an exam, and if you passed, then you actually went in on the ward then and started to, you were still what they call a pupil, but yet you so you earned a small amount then, but that your training, and it went on for 3 years plus another 6 months for midwifery.
And so you finished that, and it sounds as though you spent some years then practicing nursing.
That's right. Yes, I graduated in January '54.
Okay. And then, I'm just curious, did you move out of your family home? And
Oh, I went to high school in the city in Kingston, away from my family, and the nursing school was also in Kingston, so I was there, and I lived in Kingston mainly.
so you,
After I graduated in nursing, I worked in Port Maria, my hometown, again for about 6 months, and then I was called to go in for training for midwifery. So I left, and I never really lived in Port Maria again. Well, I left Jamaica in 1960, and I graduated in '54, and then I went back, as I say, 6 months, but like mid '54 until the end of '54 for midwifery, and I worked until I left in 1960. I knew that Canada was very cold. All the pictures of people I saw who were there, they were standing behind pine trees and snow, so I expected that. I also expected when I came here to see snow up to the rooftops. I didn't know anything about central heating, so I thought you would be. You see, I didn't want to leave Jamaica at any time. But a lot of my friends were leaving, and they sort of inveigled me to come. And so the seed was planted, and it was there. And then I started doing special duty, and sometimes it didn't work, and sometimes, there was a stretch between getting work and so on. And I applied for a job where one of my friends was working in London, Ontario. And that was the old Veterans Hospital, Westminster Hospital. And I was offered the job. And then I had to do all the preliminaries, getting tests and so on. And so I sort of lagged along, not really putting too much effort into it. And after a year had passed, they said I had to make up my mind whether I was coming or not. And so I decided, yes, I would go. But I intended to come, spend about 5 years, and return to my country.
and it hasn't happened yet.
Well, what happened was that I was married in 1962 in London. And then in '64, my first son was born. And it goes on from there.
One thing led to another.
That's right, yes. It was 7 years before I went back for a visit. Mainly for economic reasons, yeah. I think basically that was the draw. And then, of course, travel was sort of coming into vogue. People wanted to go places, and that was one way of traveling where you could work in another place and enjoy it,
Yeah, nursing is very portable.
That's right, yes, yeah.
And how many of them came to Canada?
Oh, tons of them. Tons of nurses came to Canada. A lot went to the United States also. A lot of young people went to Britain to be trained as nurses. Or when they got there, they decided to, because it was easy to get in, you didn't have to pay. And so a lot of Jamaicans became nurses in Britain because of that. It was harder in the States to go in. So mostly the ones that went to the States were graduate nurses.
Discrimination.
Oh, definitely. I lived in residence. I was lucky when as I say, I had this job before I came. So I came directly into residence. People knew I was coming. I hadn't brought any uniforms. I thought when I get to Canada, I'll buy new uniforms. It turned out that I had to start work. I came about 11 o'clock that night, and some girls from the residence came to pick me up at the airport, and told me I had to go to work at 8:30 the next morning.
Welcome to Canada.
That's right. So the girls all chipped in. Somebody loaned me a pair of shoes. We used to wear the veil those days. You know what the nursing sisters wore. We used to wear the veil. Somebody loaned me a veil. Somebody loaned me a uniform. So I was well equipped and went to work the next day, all dressed up in different things from different people. I met this German man, and I was not accustomed to going out in a mixed race thing. It was something very new to me. Yeah. And he was quite keen in carrying on this relationship, and I was skeptical about it. And so but once he decided that he wanted this to continue, he saw me every day. If I worked evenings, he'd be there at midnight when I came off, if I worked. Oh, okay. And so we went on for a year, and then we decided to get married. In 1962.
62?
In London, Ontario.
Very white London, Ontario.
Oh, that's right, you know. Wow. It was very, very, we were really ahead of our time. Oh. Friends in residence didn't, if they might have been skeptical about it, but they didn't say anything. They would say, "Oh, Joyce, your friend is downstairs," or something like that, because sometimes I wouldn't go. I would sort of hide from the fact that he was down here. I wouldn't go, because I was conscious of the difference in race. Eventually, as I say, I started to acknowledge it, and we got together. When we were trying to find a place to live, that was another thing. We were told, oh, sorry, it's rented. Then I would call and say, do you rent places to Black people? Oh, yes, but places go fast, so, and that no matter how fast you got there, it would have been rented by the time you got there. I didn't send him. But eventually we got a little basement apartment, or part of a basement. And when we went on our honeymoon, we came to Eastern Ontario, up to Cornwall, Dunvegan area, because he had friends living in Dunvegan. And we came by there. When we got back to the apartment, somebody had moved a freezer or something down the stairs, Richard, and so all my things were on the floor, and it was a mess. So we started looking for another place right away. Then we got into one of these low-rise apartment buildings, and the basement apartment, a very nice one-bedroom apartment. And one day I was in the laundry room, and I said, "I'm Joyce from this apartment." And the woman said, "Oh, we knew you were coming." So obviously they had actually checked out the rest of tenants if they minded that someone moved in there. And my friends in residence, when I would say on the phone, "Do you rent place to Negroes?" They would say, "Joyce, don't say that on the." I said, "But it's real. I mean, I had no choice, because I was running all over the place. And some of the places, I mean, I would never have lived there."
Yeah. And what about your husband's family? Were they?
He was the only one in Canada. All his relatives were in Germany. He came from Heuthen in Heiligenstadt, which is East Germany, the communist part of Germany. Strange enough, he wrote to them, and they kept in touch, and even today, his sister keeps in touch with me, although he died in 91. And if she doesn't hear from me for a while, she writes again what's happening and all that. We have a language problem. So when my marriage started to, in fact, it had started to fall apart, but was really fraying by now. I needed to get out of the house. I needed a break, at least once a week. And I wondered what I could do. And there were courses being given at the high school in Alexandria, which was close to us. And I tried to figure out, oh, what should I take? What should I take? And I thought, oh, maybe I'll take drawing, like picking something out of a hat. And maybe I could produce a sort of reasonable facsimile of something. And so I started going, and this teacher was excellent. He had actually done art in university, was introduced to art very late in life, so he had picked up a lot of shortcuts and so on. And he was good. He said, oh, drawing is nothing. It's just shadows and light. It's that sort of thing, And so I was really enjoying it and was always pleased at what I was producing. So I kept doing that, and then I finally moved away from Dunvegan with my kids. By then I had bought a house in Hawkesbury. Sort of went to the bank and said, I would like to buy a house, and it costs so much, and I have no money. And they said, okay, we can give you a mortgage for so much, yeah. And I need a down payment too. So then they loaned me the down payment also. So
a friendly bank.
Yeah.
I just
Chuck and I met, we were actually introduced to each other mainly because we were interested in writing. He was an aspiring, but he has wanted to write all his life. He went to university, majored in English, he was writing, whereas I had no interest in that direction at all. We are the same age, he's 1 month older. We're from the same era, we know the same music, the same old movie stars, our background, although I was from Jamaica and he was Canadian, it's really, we have a lot in common. His first wife died. He has 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and I have 2 boys and a girl. They're in and around the same ages. At the time, of course, we didn't know all this. He was Unitarian. We just happened to discover that. He had been coming to this church, then he started going to Canton, New York. And our children, or at least my daughter and his daughters, were married the same year. That's prior to us meeting. And our first grandchild was born the same day. We didn't know each other then either. Yes, one is about an hour older than the other. It's, so we had a lot in common. We liked the same sort of, or mostly the same sort of music. As I say, we're from the same era, so we appreciate the things that come from that era.
Lots in common.
Yes, yes.
So it's been a good relationship.
Pretty good, as relationships go. especially second marriages, when you've already made up your mind what you want and you have no intention of changing. He was teaching in Alexandria.
And do you think he was teaching high school?
Yes, yes. I can't remember his name. But he was excellent. And he did stay in the class, as a matter of fact. He would come in, say, oh, this is the sort of thing you should be doing, and whatever it is, and he'd leave, and then he'd come back half an hour later. And he would bring in like three-dimensional sculptures and to draw that, like a sculpture of a drawing by Picasso, and then put it there and said, draw it, and you had to figure out how to do it, you know. And anyway, as I say, I really enjoyed it. And after I moved away, I stopped for a while, and then one day I met a woman on the mall. There was this art show, and this woman was sitting there, and I had known her. And I said, these are beautiful paintings. Who did them? She said, oh, I did. And I knew her working in a jewelry store. Mm. So I didn't know she was an artist. And they were beautiful paintings. And we were talking, and I said, oh, I had started this drawing course and so on. And she said, well, I give classes at my home once a week. Mm. Mm. So I said, fine, I'll come. So I joined the classes, and there. And I sketched for about 2 years. I didn't do any painting. I was just passing time. And then all the others in the class wanted me to paint. They were painting, and they wanted me to start painting too. So eventually I thought, okay, I'll try. So she suggested starting with acrylic, which I did. And the painting, just about killed me. I couldn't see what she was showing me, all these light and shadows and stuff. I couldn't see it when I looked at the thing she had set up. And it just about turned me off painting completely. Oh, yeah. And by the time I'd get the brush on, the paint would dry, and I hadn't quite finished what I wanted to do. And anyway, I did finish the painting, and I have it.
Still.
I still have it. I don't think I'll part with it. And I thought, no, I can't do this. I started using oils, which was much slower and allowed me time. So I continued with looking at copying paintings or pictures or whatever. And I was actually copying the thing that you could practically, you couldn't tell which was which. I was really copying.
So you were really good at it.
Well, I don't know whether I was really good, but I was doing more than a reasonable facsimile by then. And I carried on with that for a couple of years. And I felt that I was repeating myself. Like I wanted to do something, but I was held back, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And eventually she gave me little bits of paper and chalk and whatnot and finger paint. And I worked with all these things, little tiles, scraps of paper, scraps of cloth, doing all sort of things, not even knowing what I want to do or where I'm going with this, you know. In fact, sometimes the girls would look at what I'm doing and say, what are you doing tonight, Joyce? And they would laugh, you know, because I'm not producing anything. But afterwards, I decided I would paint again. And then I started really branching out, doing things, getting into stuff like, if you notice, my church in Jamaica.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get a better shot of that when there's more light.
Yeah, and that one up there. Okay. That was when I was really wanting to do something, I'm not sure, and I broke this up, sort of like a prism.
And did these come out of your mind, or did you
No,
have photographs?
this is from a photograph. No, that was from, as a matter of fact, here is that jug that's in there, and I still have the lamp up there. The kettle is gone, and the mug is probably someplace around. But no, that was my own composition, and there were things in my house. Making up stuff, making up my own pictures, and really accomplishing something which I thought, although in the back of my mind I felt I was repeating myself. So I painted from 79 up till 84. And in 84 I moved from Hawkesbury to Ottawa. And I didn't paint again until 93. So about 10 years. As I say, I was getting restless with my painting. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go, but I knew there was something I was not capturing. And in 93, I got married again, and we went to Jamaica on our honeymoon. That was in April. And we visited the Runaway Caves there, Runaway Bay Caves. And I had visited them before. And I came back and I had to paint. I had to paint these caves. It was like, paint these caves or else. This is 10 years later, you know. And so I got canvas. In fact, I took out all my paints and stuff. And what did I used to do with this? I couldn't even remember what And I started, and my paintings were totally different from what I had been, entirely different than what I was doing before. And after that, I started painting again. And I painted on, sometimes I would take a break, a year or two of it, until I moved here. I moved here in 2009. And what I ended up finding that I was doing is, like, I would have an abstract thought which I wanted to visualize. And so I got into things like that. And that's the trend, my paintings. That a lot of my new paintings are in series. And the reason is because it's an abstract thought and I'm trying to visualize it, or it's an abstract thing, maybe. I do one painting and I feel there's more and I do another one. So I end up doing 4 or 5 paintings in a series before it clears my head. And once it clears my head, I say, good riddance. And it takes about 4 or 5 to clear my head, to get rid of that. And then at the end of it, I say, good riddance. Because when I get this urge to paint, I start to get irritable about everything else that's getting in my way. I just have, it's almost like an obsession when it comes. And I have to be alone. I'm always, I would paint into the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I couldn't go to bed. I would have to sit there and probably eat some crackers or something like that and sit there and decompress. And at the end of the series, I'm just wiped out. At times it felt almost like I was scared to paint. Like it took so much out of me.
Okay. Almost like you were possessed.
That's right, yeah. And I was so happy when it's done. It doesn't. Because I'm aiming for the painting to say what I want it to say. And so when I get to that point that you can look at it and see what I'm trying to say, then I feel it's there. If not, I have to keep working on it until it says it.
So let's say do one of these paintings, would it take you a week?
Probably that, or sometimes less, depending.
So if you're doing a series, it might be 2 weeks to a month where you feel dispossessed and exhausted.
That's right, yes. Okay. Yeah.
Now, is that one of the reasons why you stopped painting when you moved here?
For some reason, I can't get the space around me. I don't know. I just feel that things closing on me and I cannot get the space. I need the space I need. I just can't get it.
So we're talking about physical space. Is that this apartment is too small?
No, it's more than physical space. It's I feel it's here that I'm not getting the space. I need to, like when I was at the other house, I had this room. It's not that it was that big or anything like that. It was a cramped little room still. But nobody was passing the door or opening the door or whatever. And I was there all by myself. And, I could turn the painting to the window and I wouldn't allow anybody to see my paintings until they're finished. I never showed a half-finished painting to anyone because I didn't want people to say, well, I would do this or I would do that, because that's not part of what I'm doing. I had to get this thing out there. And for some reason, since I'm here, I remember a friend of mine who moved to a beautiful place in Quebec. She was an artist too. And she says, I haven't been able to paint since I came here. I spend my time looking out the windows at the trees and everything around. What you would not, the ordinary person would not consider a distraction when an artist is, whether it's a visual artist or a literary artist, or when they're working and stuff, it is a distraction. And I've heard other people say that too. The husband would come in the house or something and say, what do you want? Or, so I'm not disturbing you, but you're there. There's a group over at the church that they paint on Tuesday mornings, and they keep inviting me to go. I could never do that. I could not paint with people around me. I have to withdraw completely.
So if we could provide that kind of space for you, you'd start painting.
Maybe the ideas would start to flow again or whatever. Or maybe my period of painting is over. I don't know. Considering that I didn't set out to be this.
But you love it.
Oh, I love it. In fact, I'm always painting. I look out here and I see all these different tiers of trees. I'm looking at the shapes and how they fit the background into I'm always painting. I look at clouds, I start to form them into something. The different shades of green. I see, what shade would I use for that one or whatever. How those black branches come up in the trees. You can, each group of leaves forming, like a little bouquet by itself. I'm always painting. Even though I'm not visually doing it. Yeah.
So it hasn't left you?
No, not really. It's there, especially now that I watch them all winter long. It's a beautiful apartment for that. And you get all kinds of sunsets here, and the tiers of trees that you see here, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
My oldest son says that the thing with my paintings are they're a little bit of calm and a whole lot of chaos. That's what my oldest son says about them. My daughter, she picks the ones she likes, although I've never really handed her a painting. My grandson, when he was about 4, he said, "Grandma, can you draw me one of them pictures?" And I did a painting for him, not the same time, but later on I did, because he was born in Malaysia. And he has 4 nationalities. He's quarter Jamaican, quarter German, half Iraqi. My daughter's husband is Iraqi.
Okay.
And of course, he's a Canadian citizen. And so I drew a grid with the lotus plant. Because mostly when I'm going to do a painting, I do a lot of research about it, into the whole anatomy of what I'm doing. Like the lotus flower, I've gone back into history, how it grows, what it does, the legends about it. It grows, it's a beautiful plant, it grows out of muck. It doesn't sit on the water like water lily, it grows up above the water. The seeds fall in the muck and they will stay there for over 100 years, and eventually they will grow again. They're edible. There's all sort of myths with the Buddha living in one and coming out in the mornings. There's lots and lots of myths about the lotus flower. It's used in some Asian country, Buddhist religions. I know in Thailand, in Bangkok, I've seen them where they dip the lotus flower in blessed water and sprinkle it on their heads and stuff like that. And so I did a painting with the lotus flower in the water and broke it up into grids for my grandson. That was another spontaneous thing that happened. My oldest son was graduating from high school, and I needed something to put in his yearbook. And I think I was looking for that poem, If for Boys by Kipling, and I couldn't find it at the time. And that's before the computerized age. And so I wrote a poem. And immediately after I wrote that poem, a couple of days later, I wrote another one, and I just kept writing. And the first year and a half or 2, I was just pouring poems. And it's nothing I ever wanted to do, nothing I aspired to, nothing. It just happened. I did what I had to when I was in school, and not much more.
So you must have been in your 40s.
When I was writing?
When you started writing poetry.
Yes, probably 50s. That's about 1983.
Okay. Now, when you started writing poetry, did you take classes? Have anyone helping you develop?
No, not really. Later on, after I moved to Ottawa, I took a couple creative writing classes, but not, I think I took a weekend course or something like that, but no real intensive writing course. But.
And yet you've published, what, 2 or 3 volumes of poems?
Yeah, I guess I had something to say, and I had been bottled up. I was living with my children around me, or beyond my reach, in Hawkesbury, and I needed to speak. And I wasn't in a milieu that I could speak, so I actually was talking to myself when I was writing. That's why my first volume of poems it's called Portraits, because it's all about my friends, my relatives, my children, very close. All my work actually is autobiographical. Some of my poems, eventually I looked at them again, and paintings would spring from them. Or that's another thing too. I was painting what I was writing and writing what I was painting. So like those 3 paintings down there, all their poems about them. Yeah.
Now, was anyone encouraging you during this time when you were painting?
Passively, yeah. People thought I was doing all right, but I didn't have anybody who said, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. When my marriage was in crisis, I needed to get out of the house, and I started attending these evening classes. And so I plodded along with painting, enjoying the process, but not really trying to accomplish anything. It was much later on, after that 10-year gap, that I started to paint again and just had that compulsion to paint and express if my feelings, if not in words, in pictures. And later on, I realized that the two were heading for each other. So that eventually I started writing about what I paint and painting what I write. So at first I didn't know, I thought they were sort of going, parallel to each other, but they were actually heading for each other. And, yeah.
So you had told me previously that many of your paintings come with a poem attached.
Either before or after or during it, yeah, yes. And this was, again, later on, not at the beginning.
No.
Yes, that sort of filtered in somehow. I wasn't doing it at first, but my minister at the time encouraged me to start to write prose. He said he felt that there was something behind the poetry that wanted to come out. And so I started to keep a journal much later on. And that actually developed into my memoir.
Okay. And when did you begin the memoir, or when did you begin the journal?
Around 1988. And I was writing from 83, somewhere there.
And then how long did you keep the journal? Were you religious about it?
No, I wasn't really religious about it. But at first I really wrote, as I say, the memoir came out of that. But I kept writing until about 94. And it just seemed, once I started writing prose, I started writing less poetry, but more intensive whenever I wrote.
So your style changed?
My entire style changed, both in painting and writing and everything. I think because I had started writing or painting, I started going deeper in myself. At first there was a fear of exposure. Yes, I became less afraid of exposure because although my writing started being all about me. I was just sort of touching the surface of it. And then I realized I had to go deeper. And I guess that's what wanted to come out. And I was asked, you know, people asked me, aren't you afraid of exposing yourself? And I said, no, after a while you get used to it, so it doesn't matter anymore. And I started going to poetry readings. And once I moved to Ottawa, I was going to everything at the National Library, book stores. I went to a lot of readings, listened to a lot of different styles. I started writing less in rhyme and more in free verse.
And in the poetry readings, did you give readings? Or did you
Yes. Which also developed my, or dimmed my fear of speaking. And the church really, they were very, very supportive. Everything I wrote, you know, they took it as something special, and my minister was very, very good. And I developed more confidence in my writing. The painting has dimmed since I moved here. The writing continues, and at the writers group, we all write. We write from a prompt. So at least every 2 weeks, I write something. Mainly it's prose, and then I take it home, and sometimes I develop it into either an essay or a short story, depending on the source of it. Well, basically, most of my writing is nonfiction. It's all about me or my environment or people close to me. Or I don't write too much fiction. A lot of the times I have something to do with it, although I stray. In fact, my first bit of fiction was someone showed me a picture of in one of our writers group as a prompt. And I wrote, it was a young boy getting arrested. And I looked at the picture and, you know, the scenery around it, it was sort of a quiet tree-lined street. And I wrote this long story about it, total fiction. But I put a lot of political nuances in it. You know, bringing in racism and so on, and people adapting to change and so on. And I read it a couple of times, and in fact, some of the reaction I got from people was that, in fact, at first they thought, this is true. And when I said my heritage was Irish, well, and then people said, you know, I am guilty of some of these. It really touched people, but it was actual fiction. Maybe thinking on it now, it wasn't pure fiction because it was things that was happening in daily life to people. I think sometimes that I've come to the end of an era. But then, of course, I did hibernate for 10 years at one point. But I haven't got 10 years to hibernate. Oh, I'll continue writing. As I say, I go to the classes every 2 weeks. It's not really a class, it's a group of people who are wannabe writers, and we write together. We have a prompt and we write from that, and we discuss writing, and if anyone has done anything at home, they bring it, and we sort of say what the effect it has on us. And it just seemed as if I've gone through many phases in life, and I think something happens when you need it. It's there, or it emerges, or you pull it out, or something. That there's always something to strengthen you. And if you look for it and, you know, instead of throwing your arms up in the air and say that's the end, I mean, it was the end of an era of my life, the end of my marriage that brought out my art. And it so happens that I was among friends who encourage this sort of thing. So I got a lot of support for this. My children, I started writing just when they could understand what I was doing. So the earlier part of their lives when they were younger, and I didn't do that, they can't remember the details of that. Their conscious memory focuses more on me doing these things. So they would probably say, oh, I can't remember the time when you didn't write or you didn't paint or... Another passion of mine is music. I have always, that's one thing I have always wanted to do, is to play an instrument. When I was growing up, of course, we couldn't have afforded it at my house. I mean, if I had a piano in it, I would have had to take it out the bed. But I would follow other children going to music lessons. I knew all the pieces they could play, and I've always wanted to play an instrument. My daughter, I sent her to piano. In fact, she requested when she was about 4, because I had a piano then and used to fool around with it. And so she started piano lessons, and she went right up to grade 10, then she quit. My younger son, he went for a year or two, didn't seem to be interested. My oldest son was interested in music when he got to high school, and it's his passion. He's a musician. He's a bassist. He did sound recording as his college. So he's the only one I didn't, but he is the one that who started. My daughter used to play the auto harp. In fact, we used to come up to Ottawa and recitals and so on, and she wanted to play the harp. Well, there was no way we could have had a traveling harp. So someone suggested that she get a auto harp, and she learned to play that also. And then it sat in my house for years and years. And then probably maybe about 10 years now, I decided I was going to take auto harp lessons. So I did. So I can knock out a little tune every now and then, which satisfies my music creativity. So it's another part of the art. And of course, I love music. You know, that's how art might come into it, you see.
So there's just this part of you that has to express yourself.
Yes, I didn't even realize I had.
Wow, oh, amazing. Now, what kind of music do you like?
Oh, I love classical music, rhythmic. I don't like the abstracts. I like rhythmic classical music. Those powerful Beethoven things, and I love those. I love Mozart. It's lively and bright. In fact, when I was married, I had a CD with pieces from Mozart, and I played that as the introduction in the wedding and as a piece going down the aisle. And when my mother died, I took that same CD home and had pieces played from it. But another thing is that when I was growing up in the Anglican church, before the service started, the organist would play classical pieces. Now they play hymns. But in my day, they played classical pieces, so I'm very familiar with a lot of these pieces. If anyone had told me that they were classical pieces, I probably wouldn't have liked them. But I thought they were just background music or songs or something. again, I came to Unitarianism in a roundabout way. As I told you, when I lived in Dunvegan, Fred Cappuccino and these other Unitarians from Montreal moved in and around. And so I met them, and we had a discussion group every 2 weeks because we were the outsiders in the community. And we got together and had this discussion group, and it went on for about 8 years. Then Fred said we had to do something, if not it was going to fall apart. So he turned it into a Unitarian fellowship. And eventually it failed because people were moving away and none of the local people joined them, you know. So, but that was my introduction to Unitarianism, and they encouraged my budding art at the time. And then I came to Ottawa, and immediately I started at this congregation, and I got a lot of support. I think probably I was sort of the odd man out in there, and so they were pleased for me to change the tone of the congregation. So I was allowed to do a lot of things that probably other newcomers would say, oh, well, nobody paid me any mind. But I had a real warm welcome to the congregation, and whatever I asked for, whatever support, it was there for me.
And when did you move to Ottawa?
In 84.
So it's been...
Yeah, I've been there since.
Coming on 30 years?
That's right, yes. And that's when my real growth started. Yeah.
Now, what kind of groups did you start, or were you involved in with the Unitarian Church?
Well, one of our groups, which is now defunct, is the Minorities Awareness Group. That was a social action group, and it was trying to break the boundaries between mainly the Jamaican community in Ottawa and the Unitarian Church. They didn't know anything at all about each other. And in fact, they started off with the Jamaicans having a gospel concert and the Unitarian choir joining in. And we did that for a number of years. On Jam Day, which is a Jamaican Independence Day, they would join together, or when they have the variety concerts or whatever, and that worked out very well. Then we had Caribbean dinners at the church, but also we brought in an awareness of whatever else. People would contact us sometimes and say, well, you know, like a woman who had vision impairment said, you know, they better do something about these stairs because I'm having a problem with it. And so we went to the board and said, well, you need to do something about these stairs. And so they painted those yellow lines on. There were little things like that we kept our fingers on. And that went on for about 5 years. And then it faded. Unitarianism is a real actively social group. And so a lot of people are involved in a lot of social action. So those same people who are doing that, they spread themselves thin, because as you know, any group, you have one set that's up front doing things, and then the other set that just attends, which is what happened. So eventually I couldn't find anyone to take it over, and I felt I had done my share of it. And so we dropped that. But then I started this UU Writers Group, and a women's group, in fact, the women's group, Women's Personal Growth Group, that started a number of years ago. It's going probably 14, 15 years now. And it's a small group, and we just meet and talk. Talk mainly about ourselves or things concerning, things we're worried about, or personal issues, and we meet once a month. And then, of course, I developed Arts Night also. I was in another group, with the Baha'is, who had Arts Night, but it didn't last very long. And so I thought, well, I'll introduce it to the Unitarians. And it's been going on since 2003.
So there's the writers group.
Yes.
There's the arts group.
Yeah. Arts Night.
Arts Night.
Yeah. And the women's group.
Women's group.
Yeah.
Are there others?
Not that I have developed. Like I'm a member of all Ottawa Lifelong Learning and take part in some of their clubs. For a number of years, I was the secretary for all for 3 or 4 years. And I've been in all for a number of years, from very close to the beginning. So, and of course, I'm in the Jamaican Association. I'm a member of that, and take part in whatever they're doing.
So you have a very active life.
Pretty well. And here, I'm in a Wednesday morning exercise group.
Okay.
And on Thursday morning, they have aqua fitness downstairs. So I pretty well have my calendar is always full. Yeah. Plus my grandchildren.
You love plants.
I love plants. I love nature. I call myself a pantheist, which is one who communes with nature. I feel that I'm more spiritual now without a real religious belief than I was when I was growing up in the Anglican Church. I can get more out of being in a grove of trees, looking up at the sky, looking at all the power that nature has. In some of my paintings, I have nature at her worst, really creating havoc. Just to say, well, I am speaking and you listen. And I can get more out of that. I feel holier in that sort of environment than I would in any church. And that's why I like the Unitarian Church, because there's nothing that's forced upon you. In fact, the children are taught to create their own religion. They go through the growing up year when they visit all the different churches in town, different religions, as you say, and from that they decide whether they believe in a God or whether they don't believe in a God, but it's their own spiritual thought. And usually once a year they have this growing up ceremony, and the children will come up and say, well, I believe in a God because this is so. I do not believe in a God because it's so. My spirituality comes from that. And they go through a year of that and make up their own, creating their own religious beliefs. Nothing is foisted on you. I feel freer now to think and speak without thinking, oh, somebody's going to say that or something. I feel freedom, I would say. I can't think of another word right now. But I'm able to express myself without any fear. You know, I've lost that guilt. You know, everything, I should have done that, oh well, fine, that's the way it happened, and I'll move on from there. I don't think there's too many things that I would do differently, because now I have the knowledge of what's out there. But I took a circuitous path to where I am now, and I learned a lot. In fact, that's why I'm able to write, because I've gone through a lot, seen a lot. You know, as a nurse, I worked as a nurse for about 42 years, and So my experience is vast. Personal experience is vast. I nursed in Jamaica before I came. I was trained in Jamaica. I worked there before I came to Canada. I worked in the Veterans Hospital in London, Ontario. Then I was in Hawkesbury for about 28 years. And so I don't think there's too much. If, in fact, we moved to Eastern Ontario because my husband was looking for cheap land to farm. And moving to where we were, I met the Capuchinos and Unitarianism. If I hadn't taken that path, I would not have gone this way. My entire life and outlook on life is totally different from what I think it would have been otherwise. That's my belief in the deity. That I was raised an Anglican, a Christian, and it was good works won't save you. It's belief in Jesus and God and whatever. My outlook on that is totally different. I don't believe that loving God would condemn his creations. I mean, I have some of my early works that are just parked in the cupboard there. I'm loath to throw them out. Much more a loving God. So I don't believe in that. I think we are here to help each other. In fact, I think we're compelled to help each other. We have two hands and one has to help the other. A person with one hand is really handicapped. They need the help of someone else. I think that is an important facet of life. So my belief in the meaning of life, or what we are here to attain, is totally different from it used to be. Make plans, but not too long term, because you never know what's going to happen. And challenges in life doesn't always mean that it's bad. It's a way of molding you, a way of steering you. And you have to remember that there is a white line down the road. And if you are driving forward, and your road is really rocky, you can't just take the other path, going the other way, and say, my path is bad, so I'm taking this one. You have to go through those rocks and potholes and get to where you're going. There's no easy way out. I would say to young people, expect change and accept it. I find change very hard, but eventually I have to take it. I have to admit it, especially at my age. Change is very difficult. But I must say young people today, they are in that sort of a rapidly changing world that they will probably be able to encompass that more than I could.
And other lessons that you can think of?
Think of others. We're all here together. We're all in this together. And you can't say it has nothing to do with me, because it does. Always think of others. And I think Wiccan has a rune that says, do no harm. Do what you want to do, as long as it does no harm, either to yourself or to others. So I think that's probably what I would like to pass on. That is a mind-boggling question. I have been reading some futuristic novels, and although the computerized age makes things happen faster, it seems as if people are people and their methods of doing things doesn't really change. In these books, that's the way it seems to me, that we are doing the same things, they are doing the same things as we are doing now, with using a computerized age help, which we didn't have. I think human beings will always be human beings, no matter what help they get or something. We're still who we are. I don't think as human beings, we're going to change that much. We're probably going to expect that things move along faster, but speed doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be any better.
Just say a few things about it, when it was published.
Well, as I mentioned, Portraits came up. The first poem in Portraits is the one I wrote for my son. He was going away to college. Would you like me to read that one?
In just a minute, after we go through all of these.
Okay, all right. And so it's about my family, my friends, and in the year and a half that it took to write this, I was very prolific. I just kept writing. It's as if it was all there and it just poured out. The Evolution was my second book. And actually, I had more than enough poetry for this first book, so it automatically went into this one. At the time, I call it the evolution. It's my personal evolution as a writer, as a person. At the time I started looking at different forms of writing, I realized I was writing. Let me read other people's works and see what the way they write. And I experimented with words in this one. Some of them have a lot of wordy words but again, it was all about me. Snakes and Ladders. That's exactly what it is. It's named after the game Snakes and Ladders. And you get to the head of the snake and you move down. And you get to the foot of the ladder and you move up. And it's a story of my life. And that's what Snakes and Ladders like.
And it also says Skyways.
Yes. And a skyway is like basically a highway, except there are no stops. You just keep going. Whereas with Snakes and Ladders, you're up and down, up and down. In skyways, there are no stop signs. You just keep driving, just keep going. So the skyway part of it is that there's no hindrance, no block to anything. You just keep in your lane and keep going. Island Interlude was when I started writing prose. And I was going to Jamaica that year, and so I started keeping a journal, a detailed journal of what was going on, my flight, my anything. So the book ended up with 5 trips to Jamaica. It took a period of 6 years to write. Each journey was totally different. First, I'm going and I'm all excited. I hadn't been to Jamaica in 7 years. I'm all excited about it. And when I go there, everything is wonderful. The entire thing is wonderful. Then I go back again and I start to see the falls. And Oh yes, you know, and complaining about the falls, and my mother saying to me, "Oh, Joyce, you couldn't live here again because you would get a stroke. You worry about things too much." But each time I went back, I saw the place through different eyes. Apart from that first time when everything was glorious. The book starts off with the death of my father, who died in the spring of '88, and ends with the death of my mother in December of '93. So I spent 6 weeks there. So the book ends in '94. It goes from '88 to '94. This painting on the book, I've done all the illustrations in my books. This painting on the cover is one of a series of 5, and they're called Immigrants. And each one is a displaced flower. And there's a poem that goes with it that talks about what immigrants bring to the place. And this is like warmth to the icebergs, if you notice. The icebergs are there, and the hibiscus. And
that may be a good poem to read in just a moment.
I don't know if I can find it. I didn't think of it before.
And you haven't.
Okay. This, again, is something I did at the Unitarian Church. I was asked if I could write a pamphlet for the centennial, the church's centennial, something about 15 pages that I could have as a souvenir for members. And at first I said no, my husband would do it. And I asked him, and he said yes. Then he read the guidelines, and he said, no, I don't want to do it. So I thought about it, and I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. And they gave me some material which they had got from the city archives and so on. And I was fascinated by this. And I really got into it, and ended up with a book which is 230-something pages. And what is happening is that I was very ill at the time. This was published in '98, at the same time with this, by the same author. So I was working on both books at the same time. I was very ill. I had herniated discs, and I was having a lot of nerve root pain. And this kept me going. In fact, I remember going to the publisher downtown, and Chuck was with me, and I was walking across Tabaret Hall to go to him because he worked at the University of Ottawa. And the tears were running down my eyes. I could hardly walk. I was in so much pain. But I published 2 books that year. I have a lot of manuscripts, but because these books are self-published, I have to do the marketing, and I'm not very good at that. So I don't know whether I'm going to do any more publishing or my children will, or whatever. There's a lot of material for them to wade through. But I have more unpublished work than I have published work. This was written for Paul's high school graduation, June the 14th, 1983. Dear son, I gave you life and hope I gave you joy. What mother does not wish that for her eldest boy? But that was almost not enough, my son. I cared and nurtured you to be the one to lift my spirits when the day is done. I trust I taught you well to be a man, to be honest, upright, true, and to be strong. If I have failed in any of the rest, 'twas in the name of love. I did my best. And so the time has come for me to set you free. I pray to God that you will always be successful, good in all the things you do. But most of all, I want you to be you. Love, Mom. This poem was written first, and I used the male as an example in this. And there was International Women's Day, and someone asked me to read there. And I said, you know, I have a poem I'd really like to read, but it's written geared towards the male. And she said, can you find one that's geared towards the female? And I came home and I looked at the poem I want to read, and I said, I am going to turn it into a poem for the female. So there are two versions of this poem, and it's called Time. Time is an approximation only for the African woman. She has never been controlled by clocks or the going down of the sun, but has indeed become the master of time. How else could she have survived when snatched from her native land, shackled, floating in the hulls of boats across seas, vast oceans, caught in a tempest between Scylla and Charybdis? She survived to clamber on alien shores and sold as merchandise. With her spine erect, she toiled in servitude on foreign soils. Pummeled into submission, she flexed sinews. Seeds of her oppressors impregnated her womb, where they hibernated obscurely, defiantly, to resurrect later as hybrid strains. While tending the children of strangers, her own offsprings were ultimately ripped from her breast, chained and cast asunder. Fulfilling the expectations of her oppressors, she feigned to be the brainless one, having only primitive instincts to survive. Yet she bided time, forced to tarry until the date of expectation. Thus she lingered for millennium, as murderers tyrannized her natal lands, turned fathers against sons, children against mothers. She bided for centuries, as faces of artists, explorers, inventors, noble women were marred, effaced from history. She labored through eons of nights before deliverance appeared on the horizon, a time when exiles could claim their rightful places. Yes, time is an approximation for the African woman. More than 100 years after the abolition of slavery were to pass, before she began to demand freedom. Though groveled in humiliation, emotions hid behind chiseled facades, her soul, visible through dark, hooded eyes, sparked perpetual fire. Time is indeed an approximation for the African race. For now the torch spans lands, parts seas, deep oceans, illuminates hills, inflames valleys, rousing millions of scattered children. Now is the time for deleted pages of history to be restored, for mothers to find lost children, for festering ulcers to be debrided, for patents to be returned to inventors. Explorers benefit from their find, for artists, craftsmen to profit from their creations. Yes, now is the approximate time. I am gifted with sensations. My eyes, ears, mouth, nose, my skin all tether me to the wonders of my world, and my being tingles with the thrill of a newly plucked harp string. Nimbus clouds scud across the heavens as I hear a roll of thunder, smell the nutty sweetness of fresh hay lying in the candid air, taste the first drops of rain which fall on my parched, extended tongue. My senses heightened, I glimpse the first swell of buds in springtime, view the aura of green as I smell quickening life in the sleeping earth. My skin tingles with new warmth when I hear the trill of birds as they return from winter havens. Summer parades triumphantly in full ebullient dress throughout elongated days. Buds spew riots of color which roar across the land. Sunlight streams, brooks babble, greens glow, and clouds accumulate. I am overwhelmed as the night sky awakens and a crescent moon, shooting stars, appear to fill vast empty spaces in the dome. Yet there are secret places, black holes, nebulae, comets, maybe other universes, cached in the obsidian darkness. I am reverent when fall begins the yellowing of leaves, for awed by change, I see years passing as I grow. There is great beauty in maturity, when the assets of knowledge may be dispersed, just as trees strew seeds to posterity for the continuation of life. And I am humbled by being so infinitesimal in my world. For soon winter comes, with its blankets of snows, and fulfilled, life pauses, rests for another season. For though pulsations still quiver, throb beneath the passive veneer, life remains beautiful when touched with serenity, accomplishment. And I stride with purpose into the primrose glaze of evening sun. And was written for my grandson. His name is Barak Yusuf. And its first words, most kids say mama or dada, the first words, not my grandson. My grandson is in the age of the computer, where he picks up anything that looks like a telephone and says, hello. Those were his first words. He would take even the block from the blinds and hold it. Hello, hello. So this poem is called First Words. Hello, hello. A siren screaming shrilly, a mythical Cyberus. For you arrive uninvited, assaying all directions of your orbit, propelling your way to become a part of us, the advent of a vulnerable greening spring. Time, the mother of all life, passes in measured tempos. The metronome ticks to and fro in neutrality, simply existing, beguiling, a helix at its pendulum, marking the rhythm of days for the journey into the mist. Your newly walking feet, still tender, encased in doeskin shoes, does the circuit. You swagger from room to room as though you are aware of what you seek. Hello? Hello? You listen, touch, feel new textures, bide time as you find new tastes to savor, decisions to make, whether or not you find favor in their solution. Hello? Hello? You call out, tugging cables, placing quadrangles to your ear, laughing spontaneously, unchallenged, unrestrained, drinking copiously of the nectar which sustains you, gives you vibrancy, a violin newly strung. Like the moon and its visible and invisible facets, life astonishes you. When changing dispositions strike, the sun exploding from nimbus clouds, or rivers altering colors, moods, breath. You wake up reborn each day to a world washed clean of lingering vapors, vague miasmas, and have yet to feel the rabid winds, willful storms, sharp rocks lying in wait beneath the surf. Your constellation, Aries, shines brightly through the translucent blue ether of this vast firmament, endowing your world with beauty, not with fear. As your mind selects, files, classifies, maintains data until it decrypts meanings, your enthusiasm, passion stirs, matures, recruits unsuspected vitality, deciphering what this life is all about. And that was from my newest grandchild. And I write this about uninvited, unexpected, because he was born 9 years after his youngest sibling.